Feedback is an opportunity, not an attack.
Welcome to Leaders of the West, a podcast for innovators and changemakers. I'm your host, Jessie Jarvis, the founder of the West, and I'm sitting down with agriculturalists, entrepreneurs, executives, and everyone in between with the goal of digging into the strategies, mindsets, and lessons that have been crucial to the success of ag and Western. Whether you're carrying on the next generation of your family's operation, starting something from scratch, or determined to climb up the leadership ladder, we're going to inspire you to continue to dream big, growing not just you, but the future of agriculture and Western as a whole. Let's go.
Calling all job seekers. Did you know that Of the West has a resume database that employers can use to reverse search for employees? You're darn right we do. And it's absolutely free to add your resume. All you have to do is create a job seeker account, add your resume information into our resume builder, and then click Add to the database. Employers who have active jobs on the site have the opportunity to search that database and invite people they feel may be a good fit to apply for their position. So let's say they're searching for a specific skill set. If you have it because you've put that in your resume, you're going to pop up in their search, and then they can read that resume and encourage you to apply for the position. Now, just like everything in life, there's no guarantee. It's kind of like winning the lottery. Just because you bought the ticket doesn't mean you're guaranteed to win. But you'll never win the lottery unless you buy the ticket. Chances are you're never going to get contacted by an employer saying, hey, we think you should apply for this job if you don't put yourself out there. To get started, all you have to do is create an account on the platform and then transfer your actual resume information into our resume builder and click Add to the database. And if you're somebody who's already done this, don't forget to go refresh that resume if needed, whether it's adding any applicable skills or new experiences that you may have since you last put it in there. Whether you're a new user and you want to add your resume or you're already ahead of the game, but this reminded you to refresh your current one, you can head to ofthewest.co to get started. Well, look who's back with a brand new episode of Leaders of the West. It's me. And today you guys are getting a solo podcast. I think that this is the only thing I ever talk to you guys about when it comes to solo podcasts is, oh my gosh, I can't believe that it's already whatever it is. But really, I cannot believe that it's already the last week of March. We are done with quarter one of 2025. That seems absolutely wild, yet here we are. So with that being said, today I have a little story that I want to tell you guys. We're going to talk about criticism, but before we get to that, we're going to talk about our daughter, Jackson. So if you guys did not know, Justin and I, we have two kids. We have Jet, he is 7, and we have Jackson, and she is 4. And Jet is the typical firstborn kid. He is a people pleaser. He is a rule follower. He is easy peasy. If you look at him the wrong way, he is going to get emotional about it. Like he thinks he has failed you and he wants to make it right. And he feels so guilty and so bad. And Jackson, she is the traditional second-born child. And anybody who has those types of children, they know exactly what I mean by that. She is very high-spirited. She doesn't really care. She is going to do things exactly the way she wants to. She does not want your help. She does not want your advice. She does not want anything until she wants it. And then she wants it right now. She has absolutely no patience. And this morning, before we were getting ready to go to school and daycare, Jackson had a little meltdown. And this is not necessarily uncommon for her because, like I said, she is very strong-willed and she has got a lot of spirit. And I honestly absolutely love that about her. And I never want to parent those attributes out of her because I know how valuable they are as she gets older. Like I wish that I had more of those qualities in me right now. So in no way do I want to rip those from her to make her try to fit in a box. But in the present, at 4 years old, she's not necessarily the easiest to parent, right? What worked in parenting Jet when he was 2 and 3 and 4 hasn't necessarily had the same impact or result with Jackson. So I've really had to focus on who she is and how she thinks and what she responds to or how she resonates with things. And I'm sure that there's somebody who's listening to this thinking to themselves, Jessie, you are way overthinking this. You and Justin are the parents. What you say goes, and that's just how it is. And you're definitely not wrong. But I think about it very similar to how I look at training a horse or training a dog, if you will. So specifically in horses, often People breed the same stud to the same mare, producing full siblings. And those full siblings can all have very different demeanors, just like kids can. And those of us who are horse people, we know that you may not necessarily be able to train those two colts the same way. But the end result of halter breaking them and groundwork and getting them saddled and putting months of riding into them is going to have the same goal or the same result. They're just going to be trained through those processes very differently. Those of us who are horse people know that you might not be able to train those two colts in the same way, even though they're full siblings and they should, in theory, have the same genetic makeup, just like Jet and Jackson. They have the exact same genetic makeup. They should be pretty similar to one another, but we know that that's not necessarily right. So when it comes to horses, the end result of halter breaking and groundwork and getting them saddled and putting months of riding on them and all of that, the end result of halter breaking and groundwork, getting them saddled, putting months of riding into them is going to have the same goal or the same result. The horse is going to get trained. But how a horse trainer approaches all of those elements may look very different, right? The techniques used with horse 1 may not be the same techniques used with horse 2, and chances are they may respond differently to different methods or drills. And good horse trainers know that part of their job isn't to get through the process and finish the horse. It's about figuring out how and what that horse is going to best respond to so that they can build trust and go through that process together. So they are getting to the end result together. I think that horses teach horse trainers just as much as trainers teach horses. Now, how exactly does that relate to kids? Because let's be honest, I don't know anything about training horses. However, let me tell you that my kids have taught me just as much, if not more, than I have ever taught them in life. So going back to Jackson, over the last year, she and I have really gone head to head when it comes to me giving her constructive criticism. So let's say that she does something that she probably shouldn't be doing. And I say, hey, come here. I want to talk to you about that. First of all, I probably don't say it in that kind of a voice. It's probably more like, hey, come here now. We need to talk. But you get the general idea. So 80% of the time, she either instantly starts bawling or she flat out runs off to her room. Either way, you can't really get through to her in that moment. Now, for a 4-year-old, I'm assuming that's not necessarily an uncommon response. Again, Jet was not like that, but the other children that I've been around, in family settings or public, I think that's fairly common. And as I've gotten to know her, I've really realized that when she has those little outbursts or reactions, it's not because she's trying to be a jerk. It's usually because she's embarrassed or her feelings have been hurt. And for some reason, that is the way that she tries to cope with those feelings. But anytime she does it, whether it's when she just starts crying and you absolutely cannot talk her off the ledge, or when she just runs off and goes and gets under the covers in her bed because you've embarrassed her, I think to myself, man, I really hope we are towards the end of this phase, because if she does not outgrow this, nobody is ever going to want to be around her, and she is definitely not going to be employable. I mean, can you imagine if you were working with someone in your job today and you said, hey, we can't do this like that. It needs to be done this way. And they just broke down into tears or they just ran off. That would be absolutely miserable. And it kind of makes me chuckle because you would totally think in that moment, oh my gosh, what a toddler. But the reason that I bring this up is because I think that we all know somebody, or maybe it's us, who isn't very good at taking constructive criticism. And as I've worked through parenting with Jackson, again, knowing that when she has those outbursts or reactions, it is because she is embarrassed or her feelings have been hurt. It's not that she's trying to be a jerk. It is her defense mechanism in accepting my parenting or constructive criticism. And I think that we can all attest to the fact that being able to take constructive criticism is absolutely so vital to our personal and our professional success that I think that it really deserves to be talked about. And I have some tips for you guys today. Learning how to take criticism is really a huge part of life. It's something that obviously none of us were very good at, but over time, hopefully it's something that we have seen the benefits of and we have gotten a little bit more willing to accept. And now, instead of waiting for somebody to provide us with that constructive criticism, we actively seek feedback on how we can better ourselves, whether it is at work, or in relationships with friends and family, as we are participating in new hobbies or pastimes, or, maybe you're wanting to learn a new hobby in romantic relationships. And even with our own kids, as they get older and they say, hey, mom, I don't really like when you do this. Constructive criticism is absolutely crucial. In order to give constructive criticism, which none of us necessarily seem to have a problem with telling people what they should be doing, you have to be able to be somebody who is willing to receive and accept and grow from constructive criticism. But come on, who actually wants to be told that they suck or that they are doing things wrong? None of us do. So I have a few tips on how to receive constructive criticism without crying or running to your room. And then I also have a few for giving feedback as well, because I think that is just as important. So number one, in how to receive constructive criticism, shift your mindset. Feedback is an opportunity, not an attack. The most successful people in any industry, outside of our industry, right? Athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, parents, whatever it may be, actively seek feedback. Like they don't just tolerate when somebody gives them feedback. They are actively looking for it because they know that feedback is the only way to improve. That is something that Of the West has absolutely founded itself on, is when we work with employers and we work with job seekers and we work with people in the directory, I want them to tell me about their experience, because if it's great, that's great. Who doesn't want to hear that? But if it's not great, that tells me that there is an opportunity where we can be doing better, where we can better serve, where we can provide more of a value for people. We have a brand new feature on the site that literally came from an employer emailing me and said, hey, I would absolutely love to have this feature on the site. And I took that to our development team and we built that feature on the site. And we are proud to be a team that really leans into receiving, feedback and constructive criticism, because we know that's the only way that we are going to continue to grow and strengthen ourselves and be able to continue to scale so that we can reach more job seekers and reach more employers and reach more people in the directory and, help more people find what they're looking for in the directory. So feedback is absolutely crucial. And it's really important, I think, to really put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And again, this is when you are receiving feedback or constructive criticism. When we have it to where we want to give somebody criticism, are we ever trying to be a jerk? Not necessarily. We are genuinely trying to help somebody. So if our purpose in giving somebody constructive criticism is that we genuinely want to help them, then that is likely the same purpose of the criticism that we're receiving. That person isn't trying to be a jerk. They're not trying to insult us. They're not trying to hurt us. They genuinely want to help us. And that's exactly how feedback should work in our own lives. It's not about labeling ourselves at being bad at something. It's about recognizing that improvement is always possible when we are open to adjustments. When that employer said, hey, I'd love to see this on the site, I didn't take that as, oh man, Of the West sucks. This is terrible. I took it as, holy cow, this is a genius idea. I wish that I would have thought of it so that we could have been providing it to people sooner. But now that they would like to see this, I am happy to invest in paying our developers to build this for us so that we can continue to help those people that we're serving. So that is shifting your mindset in really seeing that feedback is an opportunity and not an attack. Next thing, number 2, pause before reacting. Okay, controlling your knee-jerk response. Our first instinct when receiving criticism is often to get defensive. Maybe we want to argue about it, or maybe it's excuses, or if you are Jackson, that sweet, sweet girl, bursting into tears or running into your room. But responding emotionally in the moment rarely helps. It's kind of like when you're mad about something and you type up your email. Should you send it then, or should you wait 24 hours and revisit it? I think we all know the answer. We should all wait 24 hours before we actually send it, because in that moment, we're usually letting emotions take over, and nothing good ever comes when we let those emotions take over. So instead, take a breath, literally. Take a 3, 4, 5-second pause before responding. And that can honestly mean the difference between a productive conversation or what would turn into a heated argument, which the person giving you the criticism doesn't want. You really don't want the heated argument. So if you need a trick for how to kind of take that pause and refocus yourself and try to get out of the emotional response, instead of immediately jumping in to defend yourself, say something simple like, well, that's interesting. Can you tell me more? That sentence really forces you to listen instead of react. And it's setting you up that you are willing to accept feedback. And then that's going to start what is hopefully a really great conversation. So that's interesting. Can you tell me more? Okay, number 3, listen for the lesson, not the delivery. I think we all know not everybody is skilled at giving feedback, and sometimes it comes out really awkward or really blunt or rude or hurtful. But if we get hung up on how something is said, we may miss an important message in what was said. Again, it's not necessarily how they said it. It is what they said that is important. So for example, if your boss says something like, Jessie, your reports are all over the place. You need to make them clearer. The delivery in that, probably not great. But if you push past the insult of that, the message is really valuable. They're telling you, or me in this case, that I need to be more organized with my information, which in turn, may set me up for a promotion or whatever it may be. So when criticism hurts, which I know for a fact I have been in that situation, and I have asked myself, is there a lesson in this? If the answer is yes, focus on the lesson. Don't take it personally. Don't make it emotional. Don't get lost in the delivery of how somebody said it. Instead, focus on what they said. Okay, number 4, ask questions and seek clarity. Make it a conversation. So one of the best ways I think to receive feedback well is to really ask questions because again, kind of like that question of, that's interesting, can you tell me more? You are shifting the focus from feeling judged to actually learning. Instead of shutting down when somebody critiques your work, try saying something like, can you give me an example of what you mean? What's one way I could improve this? If you were in my position, how would you approach this differently? I think that those are 3 great questions. They are probably pretty dang applicable to any situation in which you're getting feedback. So can you give me an example of what you mean? What's one way I could improve this? If you were in my position, how would you approach this differently? Not only does that help you get better feedback, but it also shows the other person that you're taking their input seriously, which ironically is going to make them more likely to give you really useful, constructive feedback that comes from that kind place in the future. Number 5, detach your worth from the feedback. You are not your mistakes. This one is really big. So many people struggle with criticism because they take it personally, as if it is an attack on their identity or who they are or their character or their work ethic. But feedback is not about that. Feedback is not about your value as a person. It is about your work or your actions or your approach, something of that nature. It does not mean that you suck. A good example of this is, let's say that a coach was going to tell an athlete, your form is off and it's really slowing you down. They're not saying you absolutely suck as a human being. What they are saying is, hey, if you fix this technique, you can be better. When you receive criticism, remind yourself that feedback is about improvement. It is not about your identity. It has nothing to do with your worth. It has nothing to do with your value as a person. It is about the improvement on how to get better. Last piece in receiving criticism, and then we're going to talk about giving criticism because that is equally as important. Thank them, even if it hurts. This is what I would call the power of graceful acceptance. Even if you don't agree with the feedback, because I know we have all gotten feedback before that, doesn't fit, is not applicable, just doesn't make sense. One of the best responses that you can still give is, I appreciate you sharing that. Why? Because it really keeps that conversation productive and it signals that you're open to growth. Plus, responding with grace really does leave that door open for future feedback so that people won't be afraid to help you improve in the future. Again, I kind of put myself in somebody else's shoes. And you guys, when I give this advice, I really want you to know by no means am I perfect at this, like not even close. I know that I have really opened myself and Of the West up to receiving feedback, and it has absolutely benefited us. And so I have really worked on it because I've not always wanted to receive, tough criticism or, words that I may tie to my self-worth and they may hurt my feelings when that is not what their intention was. But it really is important to gracefully accept that because, again, that's what we want when we're on the receiving side of things. It's not necessarily fun to give people criticism because you don't know how they're going to react. I think this is another situation where you really put yourself in somebody else's shoes of, if I was giving somebody criticism, how would I want them to react? You would absolutely want them to say, I appreciate you sharing that. So I think in any situation, whether the feedback is helpful, hurtful, applicable, not, it's always a good rule of thumb to say, I appreciate you sharing this. Okay, we're going to wrap things up with how to give kind, worthwhile feedback without basically crushing somebody's soul. Number 1, lead with empathy. Think about how you would want to hear it. Nobody likes to be blindsided by criticism. If you are going to give somebody feedback, take a second to really ask yourself, how would I want to hear this if I were them? And am I about to be helpful or am I just being critical? Those are 2 really important questions when it comes to giving feedback because, again, going back to, needing to take our emotions out of the equation. If you are in the moment and you're mad about something and you're giving feedback, are you being helpful or are you just being critical because your emotions are tied to it? Again, this might be where it's helpful to take some time, come back to the situation, and then assess the type of feedback that you can give to make sure that it is empathetic. I think approaching feedback with empathy really just ensures that your words are going to land in a way that actually encourages change rather than just hurting somebody's feelings. And I think too, going back to Jackson, as we get to know people better, we typically understand them better, which allows us to communicate that feedback in an even better way. Just like the horse trainer, the better that they know the horse, the more they can shift their techniques to fit what that horse is going to respond to. Same with Jackson. The more I understand her, the better I approach those situations, saying only what I know is going to resonate with her in the moment and not something that is actually going to hurt her feelings even more when she's already has hurt feelings or she's already embarrassed. I don't want to make the situation worse. So I have to be really mindful of how I'm going to give that criticism and how I'm going to lead that conversation to where it gets to her in a place where she says, oh, I totally understand what I did and, why my mom is talking to me about this. Number 2, use the feedback sandwich approach. I think we've probably heard this when you're like breaking up with somebody, right? You tell, oh, hey, you're good at this, but it's just not for me. And, then you say another nice compliment. Well, it's kind of like that, but we're not breaking up with anybody. We're giving feedback. So people respond better to constructive criticism when it's sandwiched in between positives. Here's how that works. So you start with something that they're doing well. I love how much effort you put into this. That's you're telling them something that they're doing well. Give the critique clearly and kindly. One thing we need to tweak is ABC because it's coming across unclear. And then end with encouragement. I know you'll nail this with just a few adjustments. If somebody came up to you and they said, I love how much effort you've put into this, Jessie. One thing we need to tweak is ABC because it's kind of coming across a little unclear. I know you're going to nail this with just a few adjustments. That is some awesome feedback, right? I would take that. I'd go make my adjustments. I'd make it much more clear and I'd be off to the races. So that little feedback sandwich, positive, negative, positive, or positive feedback, positive, really softens that impact and makes people more receptive to receiving criticism. Number 3, be clear and specific. Avoid vague criticism. Saying something like, this isn't working, that is not helpful. Instead, say, Oh, I don't know. The formatting in this report makes it a little hard to follow. Let's try organizing it this way. That tells the person that's receiving that feedback, it's not the whole document that sucks. It's just that the formatting makes it difficult to follow. We need to reorganize it. You are being specific. And because of that, it's very clear on what needs to change and how that person is going to be able to fix it. Number 4, make your feedback about growth, not about judgment. The way that you frame feedback makes a huge difference. So instead of saying something like, this was wrong, say, next time, let's try it this way. Or you need to be better at communicating. One way to strengthen your communication would be to check in more often with the team. Making it about growth and not about judging somebody really keeps the focus on improvement rather than making somebody feel like they failed. Because when we have received criticism, there's a little bit of us that already kind of feels like a failure. So we don't want somebody to, dig in the spur anymore. Really making that feedback about growth is very, very helpful. Kind of going along those same lines is number 5, watch your tone and your timing. Choose the moment wisely. Even if you say the absolute perfect thing, you are giving the greatest feedback. If you do it at the wrong time, it may not make a difference. If somebody is already really overwhelmed or frustrated, hitting them with criticism may just push them over the edge. I think a really good rule of thumb, when possible, is to give feedback privately. Don't do it in front of a group if you don't have to. Do it very calmly. Obviously, do it kindly. And do it when the person is in a receptive state. Because again, I think we have all been in a situation where we are just so frustrated that somebody's words could be the nicest, kindest words, and they absolutely suck and they hurt just because of the moment that we are in. If we heard those words at any other time in life, they wouldn't hurt. We would totally take them for what they were worth, but it's just the wrong moment. That's why I think it's really important to choose that moment wisely. Okay, number 6, encourage and reinforce progress. Positive reinforcement matters. So once somebody has taken your feedback and improved, acknowledge it. Hey, I really noticed that you put effort into whatever it is, and it's paying off. Something like that goes a long way. People who feel like their progress is recognized are way more likely to be open to feedback in the future. I think that that's always really important is when somebody has made a change, especially if it's one that you have instigated or asked for or mentioned, to acknowledge it. That makes us all feel good and that you've taken notice in a positive way. And it wasn't just you notice things only in the negative. If you said something about it, then when that change is made, it's really important to follow up with that positivity. I think the feedback really is a two-way street. The best leaders and employees and parents and people in general, they're not just good at giving feedback, they're also really good at receiving it. And when we're good at receiving criticism, that also usually makes us better at giving constructive criticism. And when we're kind and wise about how we give constructive criticism, we're usually pretty good about knowing how to take it. If you are in a position of leadership, modeling how to take constructive criticism with grace is really going to set the standard for your team, and they are going to take notice in that. Same with your kids. We know that you really have to be the role model and, be what you want to see. So if you want your kids to be great at receiving feedback or giving feedback to people, they need to see you modeling that behavior to be great at receiving criticism and to be really kind and thoughtful when giving criticism. And if you, like me, are raising a very fiery, strong-willed 4-year-old, or maybe she's 14 or 24, I don't know, whatever it is, the goal isn't just to get through the moment. It is to build trust and understanding and a foundation for growth that is going to serve them for years to come. And no matter how difficult she may be on occasion, I absolutely love my daughter more than words. And she has taught me so much about being a parent and to really come at situations with a different approach. Because, before I had her, I thought that I could just parent one way and that was going to work for all of my kids. And I have realized that kids are very similar to those full sibling horses that I talked about earlier, where you have to train one way and train one the other. and the goal is the same and you're going to get to the same goal, but how you get there is going to be a little bit different. And I am just so thankful to have her because I do think that her strong-willed, fiery nature, it's made me a better parent. It has made me a better leader. It's made me a better friend to people because, again, I'm seeing things and interacting with people from this different perspective. And I really have taken a slowed down approach. And I never would have had that if I didn't have my strong, spicy little 4-year-old. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys. If there was something about it that you loved, definitely share that with us. I love getting to share things like this with you guys. And like I said, by no means am I perfect at receiving feedback. There are some times when, man, that stuff hurts. And there are often times where I could be 10 times better at giving feedback. But this is something that I think is so very vital to forming strong relationships, whether those are personal, with your romantic partner or your spouse, or with your family, with your kids, with your friends, in work situations. I think that this is something that is really, really helpful. I think you guys have listened to me long enough, so we're going to get going, but we will be back here next week with a brand new episode of Leaders of the West. Do me a favor, tell your friends. And I am so thankful for you. We'll see you here next week.
If you loved this episode, do us a favor and share it with someone else who might find just as much value in it as you did. We're on a mission to continue to grow and strengthen the future of agriculture and Western industries, and you spreading the word helps us make more of a positive impact. It also makes a big difference when you take a minute to go rate and review the show. We can't thank you enough for listening, for sharing, and for loving Ag and Western as much as we do. We'll see you back here for our next episode.